All right, today is Sunday, June 20th, 2021. Holy cow, 2021. It's like we're in the future. And this is episode 254 of the Defensive Security Podcast, the Great Revival.
The Great Revival. And by the way, happy Father's Day. And I don't think I remember how to do this, but hi.
Hi. It has been so long.
How long has it been?
I've forgotten how to internet. It's been almost a year. Our last one was July 14th of last year.
And why, poor Jerry, why have we left our wonderful listeners alone for so long and alone in the woods?
Alone to fend for themselves.
Yes.
Well, so for me, I took on a new job, and it was, it was like the opportunity of a lifetime. And so I am ecstatic that I was given this opportunity, but it has been a lot, and a lot more than I was able to accommodate a bunch of other, do that in my normal slate of extracurricular activities, like, sleeping and eating and having a family.
I had no idea being a character at one of those Chuck E. Cheese's was going to take so much of your time.
Well, look, you gotta pour yourself into your work.
No, I understand. So is it starting to calm down a little bit? Do you think we'll be able to slowly revive this?
I would love to get back onto a weekly schedule. I will say that no, it is not slowing down. If anything, it is accelerating. But my capability to handle it and stay sane is improving. So.
Oh, well, that's good.
Yeah,
that's good. Well, excellent. Well, I'm so happy that we're back, and hopefully some of our listeners are still out there and remember who we are and join us once again on our regular machinations around the craziness that is information security.
Absolutely, and just do remember that we love you all. It was me, not you. So. There you go.
I love most of you. There's a few of you out there that scare me.
You know who we're talking about. All right. So in the past year, it's been kind of a quiet
disclaimer.
Oh, that's right. The thoughts and opinions that we talk about on this show are ours and do not represent anything other than our own and our respective pets.
That's true. See, we're out of practice. But yes, you were saying.
Yeah. So there's been, I guess, a little bit's gone on in the security world since we last had a show. A couple things.
It's been quiet, I thought.
It was pretty quiet. Seriously though, there's been some fairly significant stuff going on. Kind of going back in my mental Rolodex. Obviously, the SolarWinds debacle at the end of last year was quite a momentous occasion. I think that was a pretty big wake-up call for a lot of businesses, just given the scale and the nature of the attack. I think there was something like 18,000 organizations that were touched, as we will say, by this particular attack. And now, as best I understand, that not all 18,000 were actually pillaged and burned, but I think it caused a lot of work for a lot of incident response teams for sure.
Yeah, and those kind of supply chain attacks are really pernicious and difficult. There's not a whole lot of vendors out there selling the magic blinky box that will secure you from a trusted vendor having malicious code thrown into their update stream. That's a tough one. Aside from, once again, that very difficult task of segmentating and monitoring for malicious activity between trusted devices, which sounds great in principle, but is really tough to instrument in after you've got a very established environment.
Well, especially when you're talking about something like SolarWinds, which
Right.
is by design intended to have a pretty privileged place in your network in terms of the ability to reach out and touch things. And it occurred to me that it was very much like the NotPetya attack. Obviously the payload, as it were, significantly different and whatnot. But in NotPetya, there was lots of armchair quarterbacking saying, why on earth did a Ukrainian tax software have the ability to interrupt hospitals in Wisconsin or wherever they were, right? That didn't make a lot of sense, and so there was lots of opinionating about segmentation and whatnot. But this is kind of a different beast when you have a trusted piece of software like SolarWinds, which again, like that, I would assume that most organizations that had it, unless they have internal segmentation and it's only responsible for certain aspects of the environment, I mean that's really bad.
Yeah, that's a tough one. But it brings up another thought, which is, for good or ill, whether we like it or not, we have to trust some vendors, and we have to take that risk. This kind of goes back to a really old argument about open source versus closed source and commercial off the shelf, and what do you trust and can you verify it? The old debate was with open source, well, I guess it's not that old, it's still current, is people can analyze the code and check it for things. But we've seen in our career, even with open source stuff, bugs and backdoors survive for years and years and years. So in practice, it's not like there's a whole bunch of people out there auditing the code, unless they specifically, unless they're researchers or they make a business off that, or they're the bad guys or whatever. But in this case, it's one of those examples of a lot of people who I don't think understand operational realistic environments. Like, you should never trust a third-party vendor like that. They should never have that. But at the end of the day, you still have to get business done. You still have to find tools to facilitate the needs you have. And as because we're in an environment now where we have preached so much, you need to patch, you need to patch, you need to patch, you need to patch, those update channels are now a really juicy target. And I don't know a good way around that aside from hope, which is not really a strategy. But at some point, you still have to trust those vendors and take the risk.
Or not. In my observation is there's a good number of organizations that take a look at what happened with SolarWinds and maybe they were impacted by it and saying never again. Like,
well, not with that vendor.
Not with that vendor, right? So now we're going to move over to some other vendor,
right,
on the premise that they're going to be way better than SolarWinds. But at the end of the day, we don't really know.
Yeah, it's easy to dissect, the whole SolarWinds root cause of it was an intern and this happened and that happened, and it's really easy to point fingers and blame and go, oh, that's crazy. But that's only one of 1,000 ways this could go down.
Yep.
And glass houses,
What I am observing is that for those organizations that produce products, software products in particular, or IT products, it is becoming increasingly important for us to secure the build chain or the build environments and whatnot, because I suspect SolarWinds really never thought of themselves as the vehicle by which a bunch of government agencies in the U.S. would get attacked. And the same thing recently happened with Microsoft and Exchange, and just this past week there was some malware running around that was signed by Microsoft. We don't yet know, at least I've not seen the readout on how that happened, but like you can kind of use your imagination. It's not good. When you as a manufacturer have that privileged place in customers' networks, and it becomes incumbent on you to improve your hygiene, and I think that's where we're going to see a lot of focus now. In fact, we saw but 2 months ago, a month ago maybe, the U.S. Government released an executive order directing a bunch of government agencies to come up with some draft regulations on how to improve software supply chain security. Now, the skeptic in me says, well, will that really result in anything meaningful, or is it just going to be more bureaucracy? Don't really know. But the net point is, I think as an industry, we do have to get better. But as a customer, it becomes really difficult. How do you know which of your providers, software providers or hardware providers, are acting responsibly and which aren't?
Well, you send them the third-party risk management spreadsheet to fill out, and you ask.
That's a good point. I forgot about that.
Do you secure?
I forgot about that.
Your code supply chain. No.
Yeah. Do you run antivirus?
Right. And what's interesting about this too is we're moving into a world where, or we've already moved into, development speeds up and it gets faster, and we're trying to build less friction into that build environment, into that coding environment. Now, I'm not a coder, I'm not a dev guy, so I don't understand this very well as some can and do. But security is a friction point often, so that can be at odds with what the industry is driving towards, which is faster, more nimble, dare I say, more agile development practices. And how do you balance that out? And you're right. When you take it from the flip side of, hey, if you're that developer or that company that's in those networks that could be a victim of supply chain attack, yeah, there's a lot to think about there, and there's a lot they could do or should do. But it's always at odds with, how fast can I develop? How quick can I put innovation out? How can I serve my customers' needs? How
can I reduce my costs?
Right. So it's a tough problem.
It is. But we are. I think we are entering a new. It's not really a new phase. I'm sure I'll get angry emails that say, this has always been a problem. It's just, it's becoming the shark attack of 2021.
Look, man,
right?
It was a digital Pearl Harbor, man. It was a digital Pearl Harbor.
Oh, geez, that brings some flashbacks.
I was there on the beach that day.
Jeez. Ridiculous. Anyway.
You bring up the government, though, which is interesting. What I fear, honestly, is that most of the time legislation becomes, much like compliance, after the fact, fighting the last war. It becomes a bare minimum that people point to as, look, we're secure. And vendors game it to get their gear listed as required or recommended. And I don't know, I'm just very cynical of the slow-moving bureaucracy of a government keeping up with the threat landscape. But I don't know, maybe. Well,
I wouldn't say that the commercial space has done stellar there either. So
Well, the flip side is, how many attacks did they stop that we don't know about?
Well, that's fair.
Right? SolarWinds was a failure, but was that one failure out of 5,000 legitimate serious attempts? I don't know. Yeah, was it one failure out of 20? I don't know. It's really tough to quantify that.
No, that's true. That's true. I guess where I'm going is that I think that we're going to see this attack chain become much more popular, and so I think we have to be wary of that. We saw some. I mean, there were obviously different facts, but there was a recent thing with CodeCov, which is just boggles my mind. It's a code coverage analyzer that, used wrongly, um, in your release pipeline, it's actually pulling down a bash script straight from a web page and executing it in the shell. Like, what could possibly go wrong there? Right. So,
Brilliant.
and it did, So, um, but again, the point is the bad guys are, they're driven to make money, to accomplish their objectives, however that may be. And as we get better at securing the perimeter, I'm not saying we are all that yet, but as as it becomes harder to do, accomplish your mission through one method, the water sloshes to some other place. Similar to what's going on with ransomware right now. Right? The ransomware, and we saw this, I remember this was kind of on the uptick when we last spoke, where the bad guys were, not just encrypting, but also stealing.
Yeah. And this is it's an old term, but it's a constant arms race where the bad guys are always looking for new, innovative ways to achieve their goals. And I think this is something I was going to comment on later when we kind of talked a little bit more of ransomware. I think what's frustrating me in the ransomware conversation a little bit right now is there seems to be this dialogue happening where it's this one monolithic bad guy organization that's centrally controlled and has the same motivation and the same techniques and, can all be controlled just by stopping Russia. And that's just not true. There's thousands of people out there playing with ransomware. And they all have different skill sets and different capabilities and different ideas and different methodologies. And in the real world, there's so much random crap that happens that you could never predict. That it's just pure chaos. And in the sense of, 1,000 typewriters with 1,000 monkeys and 1,000 ears finds ways. And I don't know there's ever going to be one easy solve to ransomware, especially because a lot of people think ransomware is the attack. That's actually the follow-up, the payload. The ransomware can get in 1,000 different ways. Now, it may have similar behavior that you can target and stop that makes sense and you can look for it, but it's not like I think there's just some nuance lost, especially when it's now gotten up to the government levels and they're talking about it as like it's this just one thing and this one, and everything's nation state and everything's. I'm like, there's so many little variations and nuances out there. I'm not articulating this very well. I'm clearly out of practice, but you know what I'm saying though? It's like, it's never going to be that simple.
Yeah. There's lots of different motivations, lots of different personalities, people, tactics, and whatnot. It's what is also very interesting is the commercialization of these attacks, because as you pointed out, ransomware is usually kind of a late stage component in an attack, but also a lot of ransomware now is provided as software as a service. In the case, for example, of the Colonial Pipeline incident that happened pretty recently.
I think I heard about that.
You may have. It caused a couple of gas stations around here to run out for a little bit, and lots of. I would call that a PowerPoint generating event.
You're such an executive now.
Yeah,
but that's a perfect example of. If we talk about that for a minute, the ransomware got paid, lots of angst over that, which we can talk about. But then the feds recovered some of that Bitcoin payout. And I saw all this assumption turning into fact in the Twitter sphere around that, where I don't have it right in front of me, but based on the way that the Fed documentation came out about the search order and the way that they went out, everybody assumed that money that Darkseed supposedly captured or ransomed out of Colonial Pipeline was at Coinbase because of the way the feds did it. And all these people are like, wow, that just doesn't make any sense. There's no way somebody sophisticated enough to take down an entire pipeline would then put their Bitcoin in a US based hosted Bitcoin wallet. And then Coinbase was like, guys, we don't know what you're talking about. We had nothing to do with this. But all these people started making all these assumptions. And I'm just going to say for the record, one, Colonial Pipeline attack did not get anywhere near the pipelines. It got into what we understand, at least to this extent, the back-end administrative systems and the billing systems. And as I understand it, take it with a grain of salt, Colonial Pipeline shut down the pipeline because they were concerned about being able to bill properly and control it properly. But the actual ICS systems, this wasn't like a Stuxnet. They never got near the ICS systems as we understand it today. But people are saying, well, if they're sophisticated enough to do that, then they wouldn't be dumb enough to put their money in this wallet here. I'm like, those are two different skill sets, and people make mistakes all the time. And we don't really know the full story. So you cannot translate one skill set, capability, and maturity over to another like that. And as far as we know, the feds had somehow gotten the password to that Bitcoin wallet. We don't know how or why yet. But people make mistakes all the time. And it's sometimes the feds get lucky, and sometimes they monitor sloppy OPSEC communication by the bad guys. So what I'm saying is that a lot of people try to conflate the skill set of a bad guy like it's a Jason Bourne movie. I'm like, weird stuff happens all the time. Mistakes happen all the time.
I assume it was Elvis on the moon base that gave him the password. But
that's probably true.
Yeah, well, to some extent, I think Occam's razor comes into play because with Colonial, was it a super sophisticated attack, or did they fall victim to the same kind of attack that hospitals and law firms and many other entities that have traditional IT fall victim to all the time? And for whatever reason, they chose to, and probably the right call, I'm going to guess, shut down their pipeline operations. Whether it was because of billing or because of safety or because of who knows, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean that it was a targeted attack, or even that the people who propagated the attack or perpetrated the attack actually understood what they were doing.
Right, and there's a lot
who they were attacking. So that's a hypothesis at this point. But it is interesting, by the way. On the other side, it is interesting in that it shows the fragility of things like that. Because so let's just say that Occam's razor is right, and that simplest explanation is the right one, and they were just the victim of circumstance. Holy cow, that's a trivial target of or crime of opportunity was able to shut down such a massive piece of infrastructure. That's also a problem.
It is. But would it happen again now? So now we have this input into the thinking. And I don't know, 5 years from now, I guess what I'm saying is that if your store is broken into and you see other stores on the street broken into, you may adjust your security. So I guess what I'm saying is that, yes, it was fragile and it shows fragility, but I don't think that that's a permanent state of things. People have the opportunity to look at that and learn from it, and hopefully find
hopefully
ways.
They do.
I'm hoping other pipeline companies are now wargaming this situation and going, what would we do? Because this was somewhat fresh territory. And for good or ill, they made a call. I can't really judge that call. I wasn't there. But other people can now look at it in hindsight and look at it in their operations and decide, how could we not do that if we got hit? How could we harden against that? Whether or not they take those steps and spend the money, I don't know. But it's a tough thing. And then, Congress calls the CEO before them to testify. I'm like, what are you going to do, Congress? Seriously.
Pass a law.
Okay.
That's what they do.
I mean, the only thing I think the government probably could effectively do is start making agreements with foreign governments to arrest these guys who are doing this kind of stuff, assuming they're not nation state, people, and not give these safe havens. I think that's probably the only thing effective. I, I don't know. I guess I'm cynical about that. I just, in my last 20, 25 years, I haven't seen much come from the government of use from a indicator compromise or an alert that wasn't 3 or 4 days behind open source or community resources.
Fair, but at the same time, that is presumably something with investment and organization that they could improve.
Yeah, I don't want to knock them, right? It's a really big, tough bureaucracy, and the government's trying to do good things. But U.S. CERT, it was it was always ironic of like, hey, this big nasty bug exists in this firewall. You better patch it. 5 days later, U.S. CERT comes out to tell us the same thing. I'm like, okay, the FBI has been trying to do the InfraGard stuff, which is good. It raises awareness. I worry that that the U.S. government is such a bureaucratic organization that it cannot operate fast enough with all of its checks and balances to be ahead of the curve. In my cynical world,
They certainly will have to adapt,
right?
In order to be successful. Yes,
but they do have the law enforcement and political components that we don't have.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So maybe that's where they can be very, very helpful.
Absolutely.
This is way over my pay grade.
Absolutely. Well, we'll see what comes of that. Out of both the Colonial Pipeline and the SolarWinds attack, I think the government feels, at least in the U.S. here, feels a much stronger mandate to be activist.
Just do something.
Yeah. Look, it's. I mean that's the way the world goes. Hopefully, the just do something turns into something useful.
I hope so. I'm skeptical, but not because I think they're bad people or don't know what they're doing. I think it's just a really tough environment to operate in compared to this problem.
Yeah, fair enough. So what else has caught your attention over the past year?
Obviously the cloud is a big deal, and I think we're seeing more and more organizations shift to the cloud. We're seeing a lot of the industry shift to the cloud. We're seeing, in many ways, most of the vendors are starting to look at, hey, instead of the data center being the central point, the cloud is your central point. So how do we build something that funnels all of your traffic into our centralized control point and back out again? Which is good and bad. It's interesting because we just saw an outage at Prolexic, which is a big DDoS provider that took down a bunch of banks and stuff overseas. And that becomes an interesting problem when we start outsourcing so much of this stuff to a single provider, and then they have an outage. So I wonder, if we still need to start thinking about things of, it doesn't matter how much they promise uptime. If something goes sideways, you're not going to easily get that time back if it's important to you. Right? So maybe you need to build for multiple hosting environments.
Yeah, I suspect that obviously the level of tolerance that you have to that is going to be different depending on who you are, what you do, and whatnot. So, certainly any company is going to say, we're pretty intolerant of extended periods of downtime. But the question then becomes, how much money are you willing to invest for that not to be a problem? Because then you get down to the sensitivity of what are you going to do about it? I've had an opportunity as of late to talk to the CISOs and risk officers for a bunch of banks worldwide, and I will tell you that the problem you just described is on and regulators too, by the way. And the problem you just described is on many minds. They call it concentration risk.
Right. Sure. Makes sense.
Because it manifests itself in complicated ways, especially in the cloud. Because if you think about it, you as a bank or as a manufacturer, whatever, you have your infrastructure in the cloud, but then you have a bunch of vendors. And do you know where they outsource their stuff?
True.
Are they in the same cloud? And it becomes kind of a complicated knot.
You got to ask them on the spreadsheet you sent.
Clearly, that's clearly right. But it comes down to again, like you said, you have to understand what their exposure is, and is it the same exposure or a different exposure to you? There was a recent, maybe not so recent, outage of a big managed security service provider, because they experienced an outage in a cloud environment, and I know that there were a couple of companies who were also impacted by that. So now not only were part of their IT operations out, but also their security operations was out. And so like they had one hand tied behind their back and they were blinded.
Yeah, that's tough. I remember when you and I worked together a long time ago building a new facility that was going to host a managed service provider. And we went so far as to have different telco rooms to terminate different internet connectivity in different ends of the facility in different buildings, different power. And we requested that the telco run diverse path of the fiber to different COs so that if one got dug up, it wouldn't take one out. As it turned out, the phone company said they would do it, and they didn't. They lied to us. And so that's one of those things, too, that you could try your best to have as much diversity as you can and think you're doing it right and still get caught.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's an interesting problem. And I think it's also really tough for organizations to truly exercise that DR in a way that is meaningful, that really finds those problems. And it's very expensive, and it's very difficult, and it's very complicated. But I would say you need to truly understand and accept the risks involved with that, and know if you're not doing it where your, as you mentioned, concentration risk is, and accept it at a true level so that you're not caught by surprise, or you weigh the costs versus the benefits of trying to build true redundancy and decide against it or for it.
Yeah. I think cloud is driving some new discussions, because if you think about it from the lens of a regulator, let's just say, on the one hand, you want banks or utilities or whatever, pick your industry, to be able to innovate and operate more efficiently and securely and robustly, which in large measure is what cloud can offer to you. But at the same time, if, like, let's just say all banks everywhere were running on Azure and then Azure has an outage, well, that's not just a problem for the banks. Like, that's a problem. It's an emergent problem for the country or the economy. So these are some kind of mesoscale problems that the world has to figure out as we continue our move to the cloud, and why I think we're seeing some stickiness of the whole idea of hybrid cloud, being able to move stuff around between different providers and whatnot. So.
Well, and the reality is, too, most companies doing any sort of M&A, let's say a company decides we are AWS centric, and they build all their skill set in AWS, and then they buy a company running on GCP.
Right.
The reality is we probably are going to have to, for any sizable company, deal with multiple clouds.
Yes.
And then learn them well enough, and then abstract them well enough that we can secure them similarly across them regardless of the paradigm. that that particular vendor uses, which is a tough problem. It's a lot to
Absolutely.
ask, but I don't see a way around it. You know, because we continue to see people make very basic mistakes in their cloud security that causes huge leakages of data, and you know that we don't need ransomware when you leak the data yourself, right? To make everybody's life difficult.
Yeah, there was just a story recently about what was it, CVS, I think. I feel like I'm going to get in trouble by maybe not getting their name right. I think it was CVS, and if not, I
You know,
apologize about the billion records that leaked.
we used to do this show with notes. You might recall.
I do know. I remember. That was a long time ago. It's like a decade ago.
We'll do it live. F it. We'll do it live.
Anyway, you're spot on. Like that, you know, we particularly in cloud, there are a lot of ways to shoot yourself in the foot, and doing it right in one cloud is challenging. But being able to, you know, have enough skill to, you know, properly secure things in multiple different clouds is even trickier, which I think is, you know, why when somebody comes along and finds a way like the, you know, the universal cloud abstraction layer, they're going to make a mint.
I agree. I think it's coming. I think there are people already dabbling in that area, and especially from security or whether it be, you know, SIM sort of integration or whatnot. I can see it very much as in a control framework too of, you know, having that abstraction layer of I want to control segmentation, and then having that translate into the various cloud methodologies, but still just, you know, be the same mindset. I think is going to be key. The problem is, as always, all the clouds are innovating very fast and things change so rapidly. I don't know. That's a tough problem. It's, you know, you need different subject matter expertise, and to coordinate that well, and the auditors, bless their hearts, probably are still catching up anyway, and don't really know how to audit this yet. Not very well, in my opinion.
No, that is absolutely the case. You know, I do in some regards think that cloud is, as an industry, is advancing faster than we're able to build sound practices around it. Or
But the
I should
flip
say,
side,
build and implement sound practices.
fair, I would agree. The flip side is it also is this amazing opportunity to fix 40 years of bad data center
Oh, heck
practices,
yeah.
or learn from all of our mistakes from a security standpoint, at least, and shed all that technical debt. But I think a lot of people are rushing to the cloud in a forklift mentality and not truly rethinking that, unfortunately. And I see that over and over again.
Yeah, yeah. I think there is value in the forklift, but if you do that, you have to be cognizant that you probably have to carry your forklift over some of your bureaucratic ways as well. Otherwise, you're going to get yourself into trouble. But it really is an opportunity to transform your business processes and applications and development processes and whatnot. But you know, all too often I do see organizations picking and choosing the parts that they like and ignoring the expensive parts that they don't.
Right.
So, you know, but you're spot on. Like this is the opportunity of a lifetime, in my mind, from you know, getting a chance to do it right. Like this is the time. There probably is not going to be another one like this. So we damn well better get on it.
So before we run out of time as well, the other thing I saw that, or last year that I thought was interesting is, as an evolution of ransomware and sort of blackmailing people, going after senior executives' information when you're in as a ransomware, grabbing their data and finding something compromising about that executive.
Unsavory. Yes.
Yeah. And then blackmailing them with that or extorting them with that, I think is going to continue to increase. And it's probably going to get uglier. And I wouldn't be surprised if it leads to some what's the word I want to use? Uh, Things getting released that lead to criminal activity charges that would have been hidden, maybe hidden inside deep in the inner emails of some chief executive or whatnot that get found by a ransomware gang and released to the world. And
Candidly, I'm surprised we haven't seen that already.
Well, I'm busy. Give me a minute. Yes. No, you're correct. But I think it's coming. And I think that they're already starting to do things like harass executives by calling them at home. And I think now that they're starting to dabble with, releasing little bits of data, I think that's going to be their next target to leverage better ransomware payouts. It's find malicious
wasn't
things.
It the Panama Papers? I think was a similar kind of operation against a law firm in Panama.
Yeah, and I vaguely recall this, so don't quote me on this, but it had to do with like how rich people were hiding money from taxes or something.
Yeah,
and so who knows? It could be, it could get real interesting if somebody gets the hold of some very well-known executive and finds something salacious in it and starts blackmailing them. And, so I see that evolving out of the current ransomware.
Yeah. If you just think about what their objective is, which is to get paid, right? I think they're finding less and less organizations willing to pay, because they lost access to their data. So now they've pivoted to stealing a copy and threatening to either disclose it or auction it off. So that's like another incentive for you to pay. But I think now a lot of organizations are saying, well, particularly with the data privacy laws now, you pretty much have, unless you're going to be a shady company, you have to treat that as a data breach, a reportable data breach anyway. So, there's what's the incentive for you to pay there, again, unless you're willing to not live up to your legal obligations. So now, if those two things aren't going to incentivize you to pay, well, what is next? And maybe this is the thing, right? So using their access to find something to actually do hardcore blackmailing.
Yeah, and I don't have an easy solve on that one either, other than just, typical ransomware defense or malware defense. But
I do wonder what's next, because while that may in some ways be fruitful, I'm not sure that's going to incentivize a lot of companies to pay. It seems like, as a business model, the next step is they have to find ways to actually like destroy your IT.
Interesting.
So things like UEFI or hardware type attacks.
Before they buy stock, or after they buy stock, and whoever you're going to buy your new stuff from, right?
That's true. What was it? Revil or one of the ransomware gangs actually has on their marketplace. If you're a member, you can get a heads up about who is about to be attacked, so you can presumably short their stock. I mean,
we're on the wrong side of this, Jerry. There's a lot more money to be made out there.
They're finding ways to monetize like every aspect of this. So, which again is it's the point of the game. So as one aspect of this becomes less profitable, they're going to find new, innovative and more painful ways for to monetize us.
There's also been a lot of talk lately about making it illegal to pay.
Yes.
Ransomware, at least in the U.S.
To some extent, I think they already have, and what they're doing is they're using some of the existing constructs like denied parties. So they're claiming, or they're adding the ransomware gangs or specific people to the U.S. Department of Commerce's denied parties list. And so if you transact business, i.e. pay them money, you are doing business with a denied persons, and you can be subject to severe sanctions.
Yeah. I'm unsure how I feel about this. I go back and forth on this topic, honestly. I see, maybe they're edge cases, maybe they're rare, but I see lots of circumstances. I can think of lots of circumstances where it may make sense to pay, as sucky as that is. A hospital that life treatments are being held up for whatever reason or whatever. I can see possibilities. I don't know. I don't like a one size fits all solution. I'm not a fan of that being mandated by the government either. But I get the idea behind it, right? Starve it out and it'll go away. I understand the logic. I also understand that it's sometimes not that simple if you're the victim.
So in 20 years, there's going to be a whole new set of trolley problems.
One can hope.
With ransomware.
I live for those trolley problems.
We'll see. Anyway, all right. Happy Father's Day to all the fathers. Belated Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers. And anything else?
Every
like to
other
say?
holoday we missed in the past year.
Yeah. Happy Christmas. Happy New Year. Happy Halloween. Happy Arbor Day. Happy Easter. I don't know what I miss.
I, for one, am happy we're back. Hopefully, we'll be back on a regular basis.
Absolutely. Me too. All right.
And maybe we'll get back to our usual semi-quality.
That seems like a stretch.
That's a lot to ask, isn't it?
Although the bar there isn't high, so maybe be all right. All right. Have a good evening. Have a good week, everyone.
Hey, if you want to find us on the Twitters, I'm at Lerg, L-E-R-G, Andrew Callett. Jerry, who rarely tweets because he's busy these days, but is still at Malicious Link, so, hit him up.
Yeah, I have to tweet. I got the best spam email ever. Ever. It was an invitation to join the Illuminati.
Holy cow.
And the best part of it was at the bottom, it told me to add their email address to my address book. So, because their emails keep getting sent to spam folders, and I'm thinking, wouldn't the Illuminati, of all people, of all organizations, have the ability, like to you see where I'm going, right?
I do. Unless they know that we know that they could do it, so they don't do it.
Oh, hey, damn! I didn't even think about that.
So they clearly cannot.
But then they would know
in front of you.
But we know that they would think that. So, man. Anyway.
But hey, congratulations on your pending.
But I'm part of the Illuminati now. Yeah, I just have to
Are you allowed to tell us that?
I just have to send a bunch of money someplace. It's weird.
Well, yeah, it's not cheap.
True.
I mean, it's like a country club membership. You want to be exclusive. They don't just let anybody in.
Absolutely. All right, everyone. Take care.
See you. Bye-bye.
Bye.